Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we have a very special guest, and I'm so excited that she's on. She's been on the scene for over 40 years and has worked with many greats from Rufus Reed to Reggie Workman, Greg Osby, Billy Bang, and yes, Celia Cruz, to name a few. She is a Grammy Award-winning pianist, composer, and educator. Please welcome to Jazz Talk, Miss Michele Rosewoman.
Mr.
Welcome.
Hey, Mr. Preston. Good to see you, and thanks for
Oh,
having me.
it's so good to have you on. You know, you're one of my favorite musicians. And like I said, how I opened the show, Michele, you've been on the scene for quite a while. And I understand that you're originally from Oakland, California.
Yes, indeed. Born there and proud of it.
Yeah.
I think the Bay Area is the most, just California is a special place. It keeps proving itself, you know,
Amen to that. Amen to that.
politically speaking, ahead of the curve. And for me, a wonderful place to come up. And I've been here 42 years in New York, but Oakland and California in a lot of ways make me who I am.
Yes. Yes, without question. Now, I'm curious to know a little bit more about your humble beginnings, growing up, how you got involved in music. I know that you started playing piano at a very early age, but interested in knowing more about your family and your humble beginnings.
Okay, let's see. Well, my folks worked hard. They opened a record shop when I was about 4.
Hmm.
And my mother was a painter, artist, visual artist,
Yes.
kind of beginning in my very early years. And eventually my father got into teaching. He wanted more than just running a music store. But
Hmm.
he was super smart, so it was good. He went on, he got his master's after 40 and whatnot, and started teaching. But I came up in a house full of, as I always say, music, art, and politics. We're very
Mm.
politically minded in the 60s in you know, in the Bay Area, Oakland, and all that was going on. And I feel that those things shaped me a lot, you know, the art, the music, and the political awareness and sense of importance and purpose of your,
Yeah.
you know, of beyond oneself.
Yeah. Yeah. So you started playing piano at a very early age. I believe you were 6 or something like that.
Right. I always remember an old upright coming in through the garage into the house. And I also remember kind of coming out and peeking at it, just peeking every day, like, you know, with joy. I just felt like something good was going to happen, you know, right from the,
Mm.
and then it really felt like a gift, like a huge present. And I just, I messed with it a lot and messed around and, you know, maybe was given the room just to do that, and eventually took some lessons, learned how to read and get around on the instrument, and
Mm.
then kept on with my personal explorations. I guess at the time I didn't know they were called improvisations, but you know that's what I was doing, and yeah, that was very much a foundation for me, the music and having a piano in the home by age
Yeah.
6. You know.
Now, Michele, who were you listening to at that time, or what type of music was being played in your house? What did your parents expose you to?
Uh-huh. A lot of classic jazz and well, Ella, Oscar, the things I remember, Duke Ellington, and a lot of calypso music and music from India, music from Africa, music from the mountains of Peru and Chile, just music that was kind of spiritually based, along with
Mm.
traditional jazz, and at a time where R&B and the music in the Bay Area was bursting, you know, and so we listened a lot to R&B as well, and we had a good friend up the block who kind of disappeared, passed away, Lonnie Van Hook, that was a bass player, and the Whispers rehearsed at his house. My brother's also a keyboardist, organist. He ended up there a lot, jamming and playing. And a lot of that music really, it was just shaping me in ways that I didn't even realize, you know, loving it, loving Stevie Wonder and Little Michael and Aretha and
Mhm.
a lot of the old, you know, the Platters and the Dells and the Stylistics and the Temptations and all of that music. But I think vocal music and the voice has always really touched me. So
Yeah.
yeah. And so I think all of that was going on and seeping in.
Yeah, you know what? I was going to ask you about a very influential individual in your life who was great. How did you meet and hook up with the late Ed Kelly?
Oh yes, so I I auditioned to get in the music department at UC Berkeley because that was what they wanted. My folks kind of saw me there. I think my mother, she had started school, hadn't graduated, or had to go on to do other things, and kind of hoped I would do it, you know.
Mm.
But I went there and try to make this a short story. That I auditioned, I improvised for my audition, and they did not accept me. And then I had to audition for even an ear training class. I auditioned as a music major, and they didn't accept me as music. So then I had to audition just to take an ear training or any music class, and that woman, she asked me why I wasn't going for a major, and when I told her I had and had not been accepted, she slammed her hand on the tape. She said, "I disagree." And next thing I knew, I got a call 3 days later. I was in, and 3 months later I was gone. I discovered that there was a vocational community free college with a music department and a big band that needed a piano player. So I went over and I auditioned, and it was the blues and F, and I could do that. I still didn't read chord symbols. I didn't really uh, know the written language, but my ear knew some things. So I auditioned and I got in as the piano player for the big band, or
Hmm.
maybe one of two. And I just spent a lot of time there, and the classes started too. But I didn't take classes there. At first, I just hung, and they started to interfere or intersect, and I would go from Laney Junior College in Oakland to my classes at UC Berkeley and ask questions related to where my excitement was, because at UC Berkeley it was only 16th to 18th century classical harmony,
Mm.
classical music and classical harmony. There was no really nothing honestly nothing that was interesting me. And I became a brunt of various jokes because of my questions and my interests and things like that. So I just faded on out and phased in at Laney. That's where I met Ed Kelly. I, I I was in the big band, and I took a semester of harmony. And then I took a second semester of harmony. I never registered. I never got credits. I just wanted to be there. And
Yeah.
and it was a beautiful hang. You know, I started playing a lot with R&B groups around Oakland. That was my first professional gigs with a group called God's Creation. And it was a family thing. And
Hmm.
we would always pray before we hit. It was a beautiful prayer circle, and there were kids, you know, little boys singing and choreographing Temptations and other songs, and that was beautiful. Meanwhile, I'm learning standards and learning how to play, never at a loss for what to work on. Here, learn this, learn that. You know, we need you to play this. We need you to play. And so I had to learn my steps. You know, oh, I got to learn 5-2-5-1s and to play solar. Okay, and then I'm tired of playing the same voicing over and over. I got to learn more voicings. They
Mm.
want me to solo. You know, now I gotta, you know. So it was just like that. It was just so clear every step, and everything led to the next. And Ed was not a teacher at the blackboard. He was a hands-on all the way. I'd be, Ed, what's that? Or he'd say, come here, Mick. He called me Mick or Mickey, and took me to the piano and just showed me. And that was his way of teaching. I used to come back years later, see him at the chalkboard in the classroom and just laugh. He knew why I was laughing, is they made him do that, you know, to have a demeanor more fitting to, which is crazy because that music department I found out had a total of about $500 budget a semester.
Wow.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And so it was pure passion driving the teachers and everybody in it. And Ed's friends were, Pharaoh Sanders was always coming through, and you might be in the practice room, and in the little window, you'd see this face, you know, with the beard. And, you know, so he'd be going around and listening, looking, listening. And critic Philip Elwood taught a class there, and later on shaped me in some unexpected ways because he heard where I was going before I did. He asked me one day later after I was not at the school anymore if I wanted to get in at the Keystone all week. The Keystone Corner uh, was my world, my musical world. Everybody came in from everywhere, especially New York, and they got tired of seeing me with my ear to the back door and started letting me in. And so Mr. Elwood had asked me, did I want to get in to hear Cecil Taylor one week? And I had just heard him on the radio maybe 3 weeks before I had become familiar with him. I said, oh, okay, sure, I'd love to. I went 4 out of 6 nights, and I went through a real process, a real transformation. I remember Jimmy Lyons on stage and Rafe Malik.
Yeah.
And I remember the contrast. I think it was Andrew Cyril on drums. I'm not really sure. I saw him a bunch of times. The week that I played the Keystone right before moving to New York was a Cecil week. And it was a Monday. And I met Cecil that Monday. But long before, I went and heard him, and I observed the time people smoked on stage in the club. And Jimmy Lyons was up there on when Cecil would play Smoking, and just smiling and just smooth riding the wave. But Rafe, it was like the music was in his body, like a short circuit. And he was like, you know,
Yeah.
and Jimmy was like, yeah. And I had to find where is he resting as a piano player? Does he rest? Where is the rest? And I observed and I watched and I went through all kind of stuff, in those 4 days. And then after that, I left the area, and there was like 2-3 months that I was really traveling. And when I really settled again, my playing was just completely different. So later I asked Mr. Elwood, some years later, whatever made you suggest that I go hear Cecil? He said, you were clearly heading in another direction. And I didn't know that at the time. I thought I was just learning my vocabulary and my bebop standards and the standards, including bebop standards. Wayne and Herbie and Miles were, that was our Bobby Timmons, Art Blakey. Those things shaped me a lot. Those things, those musical approaches and ensembles really shaped me a lot, but as well as Monk and big band stuff like Shiny Stockings and the certain Duke charts that we played, Duke Ellington, So that was a most exciting time. We would get together, a lot of us, and play and jam, and I was at the piano. If I wasn't sitting at it, it was in my dreams. I would roll out of bed and hit the instrument, and it was just a wonderful time. So Ed Kelly was super foundational. He would come in the room and sit down at the piano. This was his way of teaching, and look at everybody over his glasses, and then play. And then he'd say, "Who's that?" And people would say, "Oscar Peterson." Then he'd play again, "Who's that?" Thelonious Monk. He would just do that. But then he'd say, "Who's that?" I said, "Come on, Ed, that's you." It would be, uniquely him.
Yeah.
Even though he could convey the tradition completely, he was absolutely original. You heard him, so he was, and he taught us that music was sound. He would just lay his hands on the piano sometime and let it ring, and you would really feel the whole atmosphere just shift and turn, and you realize the power of sound with his wordless way.
Yeah.
Ed was I was very close to Ed, always. Toward the end, super close to, and that was hard. But he played at my folks' 50th anniversary, and my father sang with him. My father had a beautiful voice. So Ed was really, wow. For me, I asked that he come through me when I play because he grounds me. There's a duo concert that we did together with Tootie Heath and Ray Drummond. And it's hard for me to watch because Ed, nothing moves, just the body doesn't move, just but I get the effect through using my whole little self, you know.
Mhm.
But also, I just everything back then was I was I didn't settle like Ed was the opposite. So when I would really lock in with him, it would just really ground me, you know. So I love the influence that Ed has had on me and on so many, which is just that there's nowhere to get, there's nowhere to go. For Ed, it was a very spiritual thing. He
Yeah.
asked him once, you know, is it, you know, frustrating? I've got 3, 4 records out as a leader. You're my mentor. You've got one out. You know, eventually he had 2 out. I said, is it frustrating to you? He said, nah. He said, that's because, I said, why? You know, how is that? He said, well, because I know this isn't all there is. I'm gonna go on the other side too. You know, he was very like that in the way that he moved through life. He turned down a tour with tours with Pharaoh. He's wanted to stay for the community and for his family, and he was very grounded and good for a lot of people. You know, I speak about him like he's mine. You know, but a lot of people feel a certain way about him.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I can see he's had a tremendous impact on you. Now, I believe it was the late 70s, 78, you moved to New York.
Right.
And now, Michele, one of the things that I wanted to know was when did you start to get into the Cuban and Haitian folklore? When you started moving in that direction, I found that very, very interesting. When did you start studying that type of thing?
In California,
Okay.
when I was at Laney, there was a sign on the street post saying, you know, class in Afro-Cuban percussion. And I went, it was a summer class. And that was just the beginnings of everything. I was 18
Yeah.
when I started to play percussion. And I started learning the traditional and folkloric traditions from my first teacher and one of my favorite people and people I love the most in the world, Marcus Gordon. And there were 2 teachers, Marcus, who was from New York, and he actually came up with one of the percussionists here that's been with me with my ensemble from the very beginning, and that's Gene Golden. And they came up in New York together, and they did things like bring out in public certain traditions that were very private. And Marcus, he took us straight into very folkloric and kind of spiritually based rhythms
Mm.
and songs. And so that's where it started for me. And then eventually I studied with, and after that I studied privately with Marcus, you know, for a few years. Yeah.
Interesting.
Marcus took me into all of the rumba traditions from Cuba, Huahuanco, Rumba Colombia, Yambu, and he was very into the Haitian rhythmic traditions and folklore traditions. And I learned some incredible songs and rhythms and accumulated a lot of cassettes, you know, the Maxell kind that open like this.
Right,
And,
right.
you know, I got a lot of them with great music on them. And so rhythm has always just intrigued me. I mean, I don't even, beyond words, I can't even explain what a passion it is for me. It shapes my writing, it shapes my
Oh,
playing.
you can hear that. Yeah.
And these traditions have shaped those my rhythmic sensibilities to where I think it's what makes me come out really in a different place from a lot of other jazz piano players or
Without question.
composers.
Without question. You know, I remember the first time I heard you and I says, man, I can hear some Mingus, I can hear some Monk. You know, it was almost like avant-garde. I said, this lady's coming from a completely different place. And I was just flabbergasted by the way that you wrote. Cause I love you as a pianist, but I'm like, you're just one of the greatest composers around today. I really mean that. I'm not just saying that because I know you and you're my friend, but there's a particular gentleman that I wanted to ask about. Hopefully I'm saying his name correctly, who had an impact on you, your dear late friend. I think it's Mr. Rios. Was it Pontillo?
Puntilla,
Pontillo. Yes, yes. You know, tell
Puntilla,
me about him.
Orlando Puntilla Rios.
Yes.
Well, he came with the Mayelitos from Cuba in 1980. Um, I had started to hear, well, just to step back a little, really, I was pursuing both worlds of jazz and these Cuban folklore traditions in a very
Hmm.
parallel way, because at the time there really was there was no examples of, I had not heard them meet. I hadn't heard them meet. And it was a long time before that became a thing, which it has become. But back then, they were absolutely parallel worlds, but I started to hear them as one. And,
Mm.
uh, you know, all my interviews, I say the same thing, but uh, I really first heard it in a dream. I woke up from a dream where I heard one of these beautiful songs in a contemporary context.
Hmm.
And that one turned out to have a real, the way I ended up writing it, because I looked for the natural intersex, and it ended up having a real, like a James Brown kind of bass line and horn section, horn approach, because really, and that's with the bata drums that speak the Yoruba language. And I think that's kind of like the original funk. I mean, all this music does go back to its roots, and
Yeah.
you can see the offshoots of it. But the bata speak the language, but some of the rhythms are like raw funk. I mean, it's just, the groove is so,
Mm.
it's ridiculous. And so I had started to really conceive a lot of the music that way. So Puntilla was the first one to come here and bring a lot of things that are ancient but new to us here. Here, a lot of people had been exposed to the Yoruba songs, but he brought the Arara stuff from Dahomey, for example. And he shared it because he was looking to create a world where he could manifest his knowledge and musical ideas. So he was really like a scout that could see who, because a lot of people here were deep into it already. And Puntilla became like a gift, an incredible gift to everybody that was already into it, because he embodied it. He,
Mm.
he was not only a great percussionist, a great rumbero, a great batalero, or as we call him, tamborero, but a great singer with a voice like no other. I mean, what a voice! Like
Oh, wow.
the way one of those beautiful voices from the R&B tradition might touch somebody, you that person would be touched by his voice because of that same kind of depth. And he's just a little guy. Puntilla means like little point, like little period. And he was like about 4'11", maybe 5 feet. And what a voice, deep, resonant. So he assembled a lot of people, New Yorkers, Afro Americans, and a few. Uh, were there any? No, there really were not many Cubans in the area. That he kind of came over with them, and put together folklore groups. And we were at a place called Soundscape, which people should know about. Soundscape,
Hmm.
run by Verna Gillis. And Verna was into, she did a lot of recordings as a field recorder on Folkways label of very traditional folklore music from all over the world. So she was already into that. Then she was really into avant-garde jazz. My first performance as a leader, I had Abdul Wadud on cello, by Kitty Carroll on trumpet, and a percussionist named Skip Burney that we know now as Brinquito. And that was an unusual instrumentation, right? Piano, percussion, uh, bass, excuse me, cello, and trumpet. And
Okay.
Gillis, it was at a high school that PS 41 that somehow somebody came up with $500 for him and rented it for me, and I did a concert there. So Verna was there. That's how I met her. She invited me to play Soundscape, and I was there from then on. It was kind of a home for me. So when Puntilla and Daniel Ponce and others came to town, that's where everything converged. And so there began a lot of experimentation of the jazz and folklore traditions coming together. So we were
Hmm.
always over there jamming, playing, going crazy, just going crazy. And so Puntilla was giving classes. He for men to learn bata. Women did not play, not in his world. But he invited me. Reason being that he knew what I was trying to do, where I was heading, and what I needed to know to do it well. So little by little, he became my focal point for the New Yoruba Ensemble. The keys that he sang in, and the material he brought, as well as the stuff I already had.
Mm-hmm.
I created a repertoire with him as my focus point, you know.
Yeah.
And then I applied for a grant from the NEA, and I got it for New Yoruba. The name implies New York, Yoruba, and Cuba. And in the logo, yeah.
I'm glad that you said that because, yeah, I wanted to ask you more about what that meant, and you just explained it. Thank you.
In the logo, you could see there's a bata drum, which is the Yoruba. The island of Cuba is running through the drum, the shape of the island, and it's a keyboard. And in the background is the New York land cityscape. So that's the logo, and the idea is that these ancient traditions from the Yoruba that came here through Cuba, by way of Cuba to present day New York, and it's what the group became. So I applied for that, a New Yoruba musical celebration of Cuba in America.
Mm.
It's a little sideline. I'm selling this record at online at Bandcamp, and PayPal has started stopping every order for that recording. And I'm like, what's going on? I come to find out it's because it has the word Cuba in it. I mean, what? That is just so,
yeah,
and
it's
so
ridiculous.
So, you know, they've gone through. I challenged them. I don't know if that helped, but there's still just one today. There was an order, payment pending, and it you know, this other one just it disappeared. So excuse me. So I tried to trace it, and that's how I found out the reason. But anyway, so yeah, I got the grant for that, and we debuted at the Public Theater featuring Orlando Puntilla Rios. And by the way, that ensemble was made up of Rufus Reed on bass, Firon Aklaf on drums, Kelvin Bell on guitar, Rasul Siddiq, who I'd met in the Bay Area, he's from St. Louis, on trumpet, by Kitty Carroll, who was my next door neighbor in San Francisco for 3 years, from one of the founding members of the Black Artist Group from St. Louis, through whom I met Oliver Lake, who was also in the band.
Yes.
John Stubblefield,
Mm-hmm.
by God bless him, Howard Johnson, Bob Stewart, and Puntilla, Gene Golden, who came up with Marcus, like I said, and Eddie Rodriguez, another Ibaye, God bless him, he's gone on, and Olufemi Mitchell, who's my godmother. That was the ensemble. It was 14-piece, and you know, so that's kind of how all that went. And Puntilla was a foundational member of the ensemble for 25 years.
Mm.
So, as traditional as he was, and as geared as he was towards keeping the key and the traditions intact, he was also really open. And so it was really that he loved being a part of the group means so much to me. And I have someone else now that's been with me for 12 years who feels the same way, who's my foundation, my folkloric foundation, that's Roman Diaz. So I've been blessed that way from every angle. I mean, look at the people I just named, and
oh yeah,
I mean the way one goes from one experience to the next in this blessed life of music is a beautiful flow when you're really in it, passionate about it, and following what seems to be clear information and direction that you're receiving somehow about what your next step should be. Things like that led to my being by Kitty Carroll's neighbor, because I knew a guitar player in Boston who came to the Bay Area to play with a guy named Oliver Lake, who I didn't know. And I got in touch with Michael because I wanted to go hear them at the Keystone Corner.
mm-hmm.
Next thing I know, Michael shows up at the door with by Kitty Carroll, where I'm staying, trying to find a place to live in the Bay Area, having just moved back from Seattle because I left for 2 years, lived up there and came back. And next thing I know, because Michael is staying next door to Baikita in this woman's house who's got rooms to rent out. So I end up there. So just a quick summation of, those kind of magical things.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's like it was meant to be. But no, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I'm just glad to hear about this because there's so much history there, with your band and all. But I wanted to go back a little bit and talk about 1984, your debut recording, The Source. Tell me about that. What were you trying to say on that? That's actually, I love that recording, by the way. What were you trying to say on The Source?
That I'm not compromising anything for anybody.
Okay.
This is what I hear, and I don't know how people are going to receive it, but this is what I have to offer. That was pretty much it. I knew it was very, really pretty, to me at least, very kind of stretched out and avant-garde. But my first recording as a leader, actually literally my second recording, because my first was with the Cuban songo group called Los Kimi, and they were around the same time. Yeah, that's right. And no, I recorded with Billy Bang on Rainbow Gladiators in Italy, in Milan at Soul Note, which led to them giving me my first date as a leader. So yeah, I think I was taking music I had written, worked on, and then I wrote new stuff, and I had stuff I'd been writing. So now I could start to present it, and I shaped it for that particular ensemble, and hoped that it would be received. Some of it's hard for me to listen to. To me, it's very developmental on my part,
Yeah.
As a player, and I just let it go wherever things went. Not really. I had concept. I had ideas about the flow of things, but in a lot of ways it was just really, really wide open. Even though there's some hard grooves and rhythmic elements in there, it's not like it's very all ethereal and floating. A lot of it is grounded. But I guess that would be my summation. The source is whatever one source is. Mine is of a spiritual nature. Music is a really spiritual journey for me. It always has been. And then also the source being whoever your influences are, acknowledging them, and paying homage, and really, never forgetting where you come from and all that means to anybody.
Beautiful, beautiful. There's another artist, an icon, who I wanted to bring up, and I know you had an opportunity to work with Celia Cruz. What was that like?
I mean, that comes through Puntilla, because it was amazing. She was a beautiful, warm, excited energy, welcoming energy, and we rehearsed at Soundscape, and Puntilla was in the group. Eddie Rodriguez, these are again Olufemi, those that played with me on my first Lee Yoruba concert ever, the debut in 1983. We were all a part of it, and Daniel Ponce, who also passed away. Celia wanted to do a presentation of the Yoruba songs, because she's got quite a spectrum of what she does, a lot of dance music, a lot of stuff. Just she's like Aretha to us. She's the queen, absolutely beyond everything. I mean, she's just so unique. I say present tense because her music is just so alive, still.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was beautiful. I just sang in the chorus for that. And just to be there was just a great honor,
Yeah. Now, speaking of singing, when did you realize that you had a voice? Because one of the things that I always loved about you, I said, this lady is a fantastic pianist, great composer. And I would listen to some of your recordings because I have just about all of your stuff from Occasion to Rise to The Inside Out, Guardians of the Light. I mean, and I'm like listening and I'm like, boy, she's got a great voice. Was singing something that you always did? I mean, going back to your days in Oakland, or when did Michele Rosewoman discover that she had this great voice?
Well, I would never say I discovered that, but I would say that I have my little thing. I got my thing.
That's your thing.
I'm not a vocalist. I think I have a quality to my voice, speaking voice, singing voice. Um, and I think that I just work from there, and given the stuff I love and sang along with from the time I was little, picked up on, just tuned into the things that touched me, where I could express my own emotions vocally,
Hmm.
because I can't do a lot of the technical things that, well, they're not technical, they're natural for the greats. I can't necessarily do what she does or what he does, but I've always loved the voice. I guess I've always loved singing along, and lyrics and words mean a lot to me too. My brother would always say it irritated him because I would always know all the lyrics. And people around me say, yeah, I only know the chorus. That's, you know the whole song. Sometimes I do, but I would just say I've always sang, and that singing and playing was always a beautiful thing. To play piano, and it's almost like, um, well, I mean, not everybody who plays feels like singing, but to me, it's kind of like, wow, to play piano, it makes you want to sing, kind of like, and at least me, because I love the voice, and I can do some things with mine. I'll say,
Yeah.
yeah. But I'm always touched if somebody tells me they like what I do vocally, because it's not. I don't consider myself a vocalist as I might a pianist, a composer, a band leader. I always mix vocals into what I do because they're a part of what I do all the time. So.
Very nice, very nice. Now, I also wanted to ask you about a couple musicians that you've hooked up with. Two of my favorite, bassist Rufus Reed. How did you get to work with him? I mean, he's one of the premier bassists around today, and I've also had him on the show. Great guy. But how did you get to work with Rufus? Was he on this? Was he on your Spirit recording? Was it that one, or was it?
On Occasion to Rise.
Occasion to Rise. That's it. That's it. Yeah, yeah. What was it like working with Rufus, and how'd you get to work with him?
I forget how we started,
Okay.
how we met. I really, I don't remember that, but in 1984, when I got back from the first New Yoruba tour in Europe, we debuted in, I think, November '83, and we went on tour in '84. And when I got back, I had a letter saying that I had won this commission from ASCAP Meet the Composer to write for the Brooklyn Philharmonic.
Mm,
It's funny because I was sure it was a mistake.
right.
I thought, that is cute. I said, darn, I wish it was. But the Brooklyn Philharmonic, I've never written for more than like 6 horns at a time. And I don't even know strings beyond the guitar and the bass. So, but that was awarded me by Lester Bowie, Mary McPartland, and Dizzy Gillespie. And I was nominated by Lester. I guess each one nominated 3 people. So out of 9, I won that year. And I ended up with a quintet of improvisers, and I thought I might use an instrument or 2 from the orchestra. I really didn't think I would end up with the 40 pieces that I ended up writing for. But I ended up with Rufus Reed on bass, Howard Johnson on tuba, Greg Osby, who Rufus brought into my world.
Yeah.
Because they had just come off the road with Jack. John Stubblefield was supposed to do it, but he got the gig with Freddie Hubbard, and he couldn't make it. So I was like, oh, what do I do? I didn't like a lot of people's sound on soprano, so that led to Rufus suggesting Greg, and that worked out great. And is that it? Yeah. So, but we had worked before that in trio context, I believe. Me, Rufus, and Billy Hart.
Mm,
Don't remember how I first met either, but Rufus is one of my favorite people in the world. He's just a beautiful person, very, very grounded, very supportive, and he seemed to always welcome the challenges, at least as he puts it, the challenges that my music would offer. And he was so on my side always. So we do have a nice history, really, you know, weaving in and out of different playing situations. He played with my quintessence ensemble at the
Hmm.
jazz standard. Didn't record with us, but that group was that was Rufus, Ralph Peterson, Mark Shim, James Spalding, and myself.
Yes.
Interesting. And then let's see what else. Other trio settings. Me and Rufus and I think Gene Jackson. Trio and duo. We played duo. That was the last thing we did together. Was at Mesro. We played a duo concert about I don't know 5 years ago. So yeah. So Rufus is he's an amazing composer now. He always wrote, but he shifted gears. I remember at a rehearsal here, he said, you know, it was funny. He was saying to me and Billy Hart because it was a collaborative thing. Well, that's another thing we did. We had a collaborative group. Rufus, Billy Hart, Robin Eubanks, and myself, and we did some presentations. And at the time, Rufus was talking about the way me and Billy wrote and how did we write like that, and he felt that he only wrote like little songs or something. Well, then I don't know where he got that idea. To me, he's always been his whole musical sensibility is so beautiful. But at the time, I remember we laughed because I answered by saying I asked God to give me every note, and it takes me a long time to write stuff. Sometimes, you know, I don't churn it out. But Rufus went on to then bring me into the BMI Jazz Composers Workshop.
Hmm.
He won his first grant as composer and started presenting his large scale music. And he just shot out there writing for orchestras, big bands, like, you know. So, you know, we talked just a few weeks ago. We stay in touch base, and, you know, always many blessings to him and his family.
He's a great guy. You know, one of my other recordings that you did that I like, and you and I have talked about it, I Love Spirit. That was a live recording was that from Montreal, I
Yeah.
believe? Now, I guess, was that a nod to Larry Dunn and Earth, Wind, and Fire?
Well, that's the title track is their song.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right, right. It's beautiful.
I
Yeah.
had my version that we presented of it, you know, which was presented piano trio a lot for a lot of it, but then with vocals eventually as well. You know, you have to make stuff your own. You can't step to Philip Bailey and folks. You know, yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, it was nice. I loved it. I like all of your stuff. Now, I wanted to ask you about 2016. Didn't you, was it 2016 or was it 2013? You won the Latin Grammy Jazz Award. Tell me about that.
uh, and you know, before there are, I just want to mention the whole sequence of quintessence recordings
Yes.
and the musicians involved there. But we could go back to that. But that was those are two different things. 2013 was when I finally recorded New Yoruba that debuted in 1983. So that was
Right.
30-year
30-year anniversary. Right.
and a debut recording. And that recording won the #1 NPR Latin Jazz of the Year. Uh,
Yes.
the Grammy is related to an Arturo O'Fadil project called Cuba, The Conversation Continues, that we recorded in Cuba, where he had me write a piece for that recording called Alabanza,
Mm.
which means praise. And that record won the Latin Grammy. So in that regard, as composer and pianist, I won a Grammy for my contribution to the record. I've since recorded that on my most recent recording. I recorded it myself with New Yoruba, that track. So,
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to ask you about your current recording. I think you did it November of last year, Hallowed. I've been checking it out. It's nice. It's really, really nice. I was listening to some of it a couple of days ago. And what were you trying to say in that recording? What is Hallowed about? What's the
uh,
statement that you were trying to make?
well, that record is unique in that the first 10 tracks are actually a suite. That this was a work that Chamber Music America commissioned me to write. Or received the commission to write to do something, and that's what I did. Um, I have been studying, these folkloric traditions for a while. And in the years before, I went to Cuba. Uh, First of all, so a lot of people in Puntilla's world are close friends of mine, the great percussionists. And
Hmm.
in Puntilla's world, women never touched the bata drum. I never had the need to challenge that. I just wanted to be where I was. But I was learning everything with no hands on, and that's very limiting for those oral traditions that are so profound rhythmically, where
Hmm.
the feel of what you're playing with what they're playing that creates your ability to understand what it is you're even playing. Mystery. There's mysteries there. So some close associates of mine, really my family, my extended family, uh, started showing me what I need to know hands-on in terms of learning this uh, sequence of sacred rhythms that are played in ceremony, um, and rarely for less. It takes at least 40 minutes to play through. There's very unusual transitions, unusual in that our ear has no idea what's happening because there are mysteries there, and they're shared amongst the great drummers that learn it. So I started to learn hands-on, and I went to Cuba, studied further with Lázaro Pedroso, a folkloric master there. And when I got this commission, it was left up to me what I wanted to do. And it just, at the time I was in the past, I had Quintessence as my registered ensemble with CMA, but I had switched it to New Yoruba because my focus was on it. So this was for that ensemble, and it was really clear to me what I wanted to write immediately because I'd been immersing myself so much in this language and this particular sequence of rhythms, and I decided to write a complete work based on that. So uh, Roman Diaz, who is a most amazing musician, he's working a lot with a lot of people, everybody from uh, David Vireyes, you might be familiar with him. He's a pianist from Cuba that you should know if you don't. Very, very interesting.
I gotta check that out.
Yeah, there's some really amazing musicians that came from Santiago and not Hoguin, Camagüey, Yosvani Terry, Junior Terry, Arwan Ortiz, David Vireyes. It's as if that avant-garde thing is in the water over there.
Ah, interesting.
Different from Havana.
Yeah.
More.
Okay.
So Roman is working with everybody along those lines, as well as more traditional players, Steve Slagle, Bill McConnell, I think is his name, the piano player, and Francisco Mora, who was Sunrise drummer for a very long time, and he's the son of Francisco Mora Catlett, the son of Elizabeth Catlett, the sculptress and amazing artist that passed away not long ago. And his group is called Afro Horn, and it's very stretched out. Anyway, Roman works with all these people. So Roman sent me a recording of one of these. It's not a performance because it's ceremonial, but it was recorded. I used it as the basis for this piece that I wrote. And I had to divide it into 10 tracks because it's about 45, I don't know, maybe 50 minutes long. I had to create space where we could solo based on maybe where the bata sit, lock, and don't have as much conversation because they have conversation where one initiates and the other answers. There's a lot of that and it's intricate and you don't want to cover it up or get in the way. So I took a couple of years to write this, and it's very spiritually based music. It addresses God at all times. There's many traditions where people think there's lots of, they have a lot of gods, and no, and some people don't believe in God, so that this conversation might be irrelevant. But just to say that in the Yoruba tradition, there is the great power of the universe, and everything else is in reverence and reference to that. So anyway, hallowed because it's a spiritually based music and peace, and because music for me is very, very spiritual. So hallowed is it came through associate of mine, a dear friend who works closely with me. We were looking for a name that would convey that kind of thing, and she came with it. I said, that's it. So
I'm thinking about the Lord's Prayer, hallowed be thy name. That's the first thing that comes to my mind,
I almost said it a second ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I mean, you can't hardly say the word without thinking that. And hallowed be thy name indeed at all times, in terms of the way I feel, in the sense that we sure need a God. Oh boy, don't get me started. But we sure need a governing force of love and positivity, and we are in some kind of place right here, right now.
Yes.
I
Yes,
can't
and you're.
do this interview without referencing what's
Oh,
going
yeah.
on somewhere.
Please share your heart. I mean, that's what it's about. I've had other musicians like Avery Sharp and others who've talked about the same thing, where our country is right now. Yeah, it is it's something.
It's in a deep place. Every day it's deeper. It's someone said to me the other day, it's like this is like a science fiction movie almost. Every day it's like the next. It's in fifth gear, eighth gear, in terms of the direction. Um, I'm hoping that there's interventions. I'm hoping that what's happening right now is one. Um, I'm not going to speak negatively in any way, but yesterday was a harvest moon, and you do reap what you sow. And I do hope that we can turn things around, because I can't imagine where they go. If this election happens and there's another 4 years of this, I can't imagine. So, I won't go much deeper. But again, all of this is also creating that kind of energy that really profoundly changes things. So, hopefully that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. Michele, I wanted to ask you, if I was just hanging out with you right now, or I came over to your crib and we were just hanging out, having dinner, what type of music, what are you listening to when you're just home, just relaxing? What artists are you listening to, on any given day when Michele Rosewoman is just like kicking it and relaxing? What do you put on? What's going on over there?
I don't listen enough these days, but what I do listen to a lot these days is to catch myself up on stuff, things that I have missed. For example, actually based on your interview with Greg Osby that I saw, Greg has shared with me some rough mixes of his latest project. So I'm trying to listen to some of that. I'm trying to catch up. I've been given a lot of CDs and music that I never listened to, because you just keep moving sometimes. But in terms of the spectrum of what I might listen to, depending on my mood, if I was to be looking through my music and I saw Soneremos Tambores, which is Celia Cruz song, that would be, I couldn't pass it up. I would have to play it. That's with the Sonora Poncena, and Paparuca. I would listen to, the other day I was listening to Love Like Sisters from the World Saxophone Quartet, which from Oliver Lake's composition that somebody posted on my page. And you know what I mean? So I'm trying, like, when people put things my way, trying to listen to things I haven't heard. Oliver, I love, and I heard something I had never heard of Oliver. I love the first recording of Buika, and Julia Sarr is an amazing, another African singer who from Senegal, but she grew up in Paris, and she did a beautiful project with a flamenco guitarist. Can't remember his name. Just naming things I love that if I were to encounter them right now, I'd put it on in a second. As well as, Me and friends are passing back and forth our favorite Curtis Mayfield songs and Temptation songs. It's quite a spectrum, you know. Roman Diaz just told me to listen to the continuum from one particular great folkloric drummer to the next in terms of hearing how the one came out of the other. So that is the kind of thing that by being close to someone with such deep roots in that those ancient traditions, I'm turned on to knowledge and things to listen to that teach me um, that a continuum from another very inside angle that a lot of people have no idea. But for me, it's relevant. It's not like I know this and you don't. I'm not trying to say that. I'm trying to say that for me, this is like great stuff to know, for me to understand what it is that's shaping and motivating me so much. So yeah, quite a spectrum of stuff. Every now and then I listen to something of my own. Lately, because I've been putting all my recordings up on Bandcamp, you know, that I now own, that I bought the rights back to, but haven't made available. And in the process, I've been listening to some of the tracks and some of the recordings I haven't listened to in 15 years.
Wow. Wow. Amazing. I was going to ask you also, you're an educator as well. And I know that you teach sometimes. Tell us about that. Do you have classes online where you're teaching students, or was this something you were doing before the COVID-19 pandemic?
I'm teaching a couple private lessons a week. I will be doing a workshop in the San Francisco Community Center in
Mm-hmm.
November. That it's a youth program, and it's really beautiful. I have a dear associate that's becoming a friend, dear friend as well, who brought me into that there, and that's the uh, San Francisco Latin Jazz Youth Ensemble, I think it's called. And let's see what else. I'll be doing some kind of educational program at the Clef Club in Philly. That's Love It Hines. And we met each other through the Jazz House Kids program that I've done every
Mm-hmm.
summer for 25, 30 years. But Love It is, through him came Emmanuel Wilkins, Jaleel Shaw. These are young, well, these are different generations, but Emmanuel is just on Blue Note recently. He came through that program. I had him performing with us when he was 16. Now I mean, see, that kind of takes me back to this whole period of quintessence where, and the people in that group and what I needed to execute that music and how I try to bring that together with the folkloric elements in the context of New Yoruba and the evolution of players and things that work well. There's a lot to say about all that. But in terms of teaching and educating, I really do love to teach. I love to teach composition. I
Mm.
love to teach piano, um, ensemble, which now has become a difficult thing. I don't know how they're doing it at the new school. I was Reggie Workman's sub at the new school for about 25 years. Benny Powell, God bless him, Chico Freeman, George Cables, and Billy Harpers for a very long time. They would call me often because they'd be on the road and maybe I wouldn't, you know. And so ensemble classes are great because a concept for the rhythm section to me is vital. That's what makes a group unique.
Yeah.
And the rhythm section is too standard, then no matter what somebody's playing on top of it, I'm looking for very creative voices on every instrument in terms of my own music. And so I'm going to bring that to anything. In terms of teaching composition, I have a method that seems to work really well that involves getting a person to pick up their instrument, don't think, and just play. If I see him thinking, I stop him. You're thinking, don't think, play, play. And then whatever comes out, I want it to be something they've never done, you know. And then I'm like, make sure it's not too long because you got to play it a second time. And then you got to write it down. That will be the starting point for what we work on and develop so that they realize that the ideas come from them and that the next idea comes from the first idea. And that Next thing you know, you've written a piece of music that's uniquely you. So that sums it up, but you know, in a simplistic way. But I've done that with kids that could barely play their instrument. I would draw shapes on the board, tell them to play the shapes, which works really good on a trombone.
Wow.
Whatever. And then have them write it down. You know, we try to define it, some notes, and write it down, and that would be the basis for what they wrote. So I find that without, I don't have to think about it. I can kind of see or feel what I think the person needs next. And I think I'm pretty intuitive that way. Plus, I always check in. You know, I say, be sure I'm taking you where you want to go. Is this stressing you out? Because some people, they don't want to deal with theory a lot. It turns them off. So then I got to really find a way to give them the knowledge they need to do the things they really kind of want to do.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of really need that theory for. You know, so it's tailor made, you know, in terms of my approach with each student or each class. And I love it. I really do. It's kind of as gratifying and sometimes more gratifying than anything else in my career.
Mm. That
Totally.
is beautiful. That is beautiful. Michele, listen, I want to thank you so much for being on Jazz Talk today. You're a class act. I love you. And I'm so glad that you're my friend. And just sitting here, you sharing your music, your just creative spirit with us today on Jazz Talk has really been a pleasure. Hang on, I'm about to close up the show.
Thank you.
You've heard it from the great Michele Rosewoman. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.